All right. Listing our top 24 running backs for fantasy going into 2023. So we're going to start at 24 and work our way all the way up to 1. They'll be tiered out. Last episode in the quarterback one, we gave explanations for every single one, whatever like that, and it just takes really long. And I don't think people really care too much about like, oh, here's all these rankings that are all kind of the same, right? So we'll highlight one dude in each tier, why we kind of got them there, what we look for out of them, whether it's a neg or a pro or something like that, and then we'll move it on from there. So going from 24 to 1, Tony, I'm sitting here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers. So all right, we'll start tier 5. So you can go ahead and list off your tier 5 of what they go up to, and then I'll list, and then you could give a explanation, and then I'll do mine.
Sure. So this is my tier 5. Coincidentally, also had 5 tiers. We didn't really plan that out. It just felt right. Yeah. But these are mostly guys in committees here to start my top 24. I'll kind of start at 24 and work my way down. So at 24, I have Alvin Kamara. So if you haven't really been paying attention, he did get a suspension. That's a 3-game ban. I'd probably have him up a tier or 2 if he wasn't missing the first few games of the season. After that, I have Alexander Mattison, probably the guy I'll spend some time talking about. He broke 10 points 3 times in 2022, and he only topped 18 points once. That was in week 18. Doesn't really matter really that week for fantasy. He crossed 17 points just 3 times. If we go back to 2021, where he was running the ball a little bit more with Dalvin Cook missing some time, and it took him 32 touches. Yeah. 32 touches. And then he did it 2 more times. The second time, 32 touches, and then 25 touches. I'd probably project him more in that 20 to 25 territory. So I don't really think he's going to be a guy who finishes as an RB1 or low-end RB2 or high-end RB2 where he's kind of being projected at. I think ESPN has him at 17 to 19, depending on what you're looking at. But for me, I have him as 23. After that, I have Jahmyr Gibbs. Talked about him. He's going as the RB16. So I have him back. What is that? Like 7 spots. Mm-hmm. And then at 20 or at the next spot, I have Dalvin Cook. So that's the 21. Yeah. So Breece Hall, you're going to notice he's not in here. He's going at the 15 for ESPN ADP. Yeah. He's not in here with that Dalvin Cook signing. So that was a last minute update. Just given the contract and everything else, that is what my tier 5 looks like.
Nice. My tier 5, I go Isaiah Pacheco at the 24, Alvin Kamara at 23. So I'll talk Alvin Kamara just because that's the one I want to highlight. So 3-game suspension really puts him behind the mark here, right? But you know that when you get a guy like Alvin Kamara, you're going to get some production coming when he's in there. The plus for a guy like Alvin Kamara is the team keeps losing running backs. Like, they're just flies that are dropping, right? We saw Kareem Hunt go down there and take a trip. And then he went to Indianapolis because they're like, hey, we're going to pay you more. And then he didn't sign with Indianapolis, which makes you feel like he's now, a couple days later, you get another running back hurt in Kendrick Miller. It just opens the door for Kareem Hunt to come in here and fill a role. And while Derek Carr is willing to dump it off to the running backs, we saw Josh Jacobs get a lot of receptions and stuff like that while he's in Oakland and Las Vegas. Kamara and Hunt kind of share similar styles, right? They could both catch, they could both run in and outside zones and stuff like that, but they could both catch the ball. So I really envision the target share being completely split here. So not in this Mark Ingram Kamara role or this, a bruiser type back and then a shifty back or nothing like that. They think they're going to be the same type style of back. So you can see a lot more of those 2 running back sets in the gun, both of them going out, who gets what, and they stretch the defense with Olave and Michael Thomas coming to the middle, Juwan Johnson. They got some ballers there. A.T. Perry, don't bring up A.T. That dude's a stud. But if you're a dynasty player or whatever like that, you know about that dude. But just kind of the similar style. So it's not like Kamara's going to get all of the passing work and all that kind of stuff. I see Hunt taking some of that away. That's why I got him down at 23. If that weren't the case, then I'd probably have him up inside the 20 just because he's going to miss some time. But I'd envision that if Hunt wasn't there and he comes back, he's going to be like around that top 12 range of running back. So, but with Kareem Hunt there, I'm going to bump him all the way down. And then,
for anyone curious who hasn't been watching, the Saints in preseason week 1, they had the ones out for their first possession. Derek Carr, Michael Thomas was even out there. He caught a couple balls, but Kamara ran 2 times, kind of up the middle and caught 2 passes for pretty big chunk gains. Yeah. So they're still going to use him the way, the previous offenses have used him with Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston. So he's still going to get some run.
Yeah. The only concern for me is Kareem Hunt signs there and it's the same dude. So
same skill sets. Yeah.
Which it's going to be exciting for the Saints. Like, just hit those overs for the Saints early in the season. Mm-hmm. 22, I got James Cook, and 21, I got James Conner, and that's my tier 5. Your tier 4, Tony.
Okay. All right. So for tier 4, this one for me is a couple potential workhorse backs, both with a little bit of injury concern, and then 2 more dudes in committees. But guys, I'm feeling pretty good about. We'll start off at the 20 with Javonte Williams. We both like him a lot. Maybe not going to be at 100% as far as workload goes to start the season, right? Coming off the ACL, the LCL, and the PCL injury. So pretty significant, similar to what J.K. Dobbins, but he's ahead of him or where he was last year in the recovery process. We do like him a lot. Just going to think he's going to be a little bit slow to start out of the gate. And then I have James Conner, guy you had up in tier 5, Kenneth Walker, and then Rhamondre Stevenson. With Stevenson, it's just Zeke. I'd have him higher, but Zeke signed there. He's going to take some of that short yardage and goal line stuff because Zeke does that really well.
Yeah. You'll hear my Javonte as I get higher and higher up this board, Tony.
Yeah.
So 20, I got Etienne, 19, Kenneth Walker, 18, Dalvin Cook, and 17, I got DeAndre Swift. I like the DeAndre Swift thing. I think that could be a lot higher. We saw Miles Sanders be a top 12 back last year. But I'm going to talk Etienne. The problem here I have with Etienne, because he's being drafted a lot higher than where I have him at, right? I had
him as 11 to 12 on ESPN ADP. Yeah. You have him way back.
Yeah.
Way back.
He's at 20 for me. So this team just doesn't throw it to the running back, which is one strike against what Etienne would need in order to provide more value. They add Calvin Ridley into the mix as well. Who would you rather throw the ball to, Etienne or Calvin Ridley? Pretty self-explanatory. There's another guy who's going to take targets away from that he doesn't already get. Strike 2, the Jags saw 1 short yardage snap in preseason week 1, and that went to Tank Bigsby. He was the one that was on the field. So that's strike 2 for me because they brought that dude in to be a pounder, right? So that's going to be all your green zone, red zone opportunity stuff. Etienne was 6th in red zone attempts last year with 40, and he ended up scoring just 4 touchdowns on the entire season. So he's a top 6 in attempts. And just didn't score touchdowns. So I believe we saw what's going to happen with that preseason, short yardage situation. And did we?
That's strike 3.
Yep, that's strike 3. We're going to get to strike 4. Did we really have a big belief in a guy who failed to score 10 fantasy points in a third of his games last season, and who is also going to lose more red zone opportunities this year? Strike 4. I don't want any of that. So
you're out.
No, thank you.
That works.
Yeah,
that works.
Yeah, 4 strikes. That happens in baseball, right? I think that's a Dodgers Giants thing or something like that. But,
yeah.
But yeah, that's my Etienne take. So I know people are really high on Travis Etienne, all this kind of stuff. I think too many people would just fall in love with talent, but talent really doesn't matter when you're not getting the ball. So I don't think that you don't have Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones to stretch the field, Calvin Ridley, all these other dudes, Trevor Lawrence, who's the golden child of quarterbacks since Andrew Luck. And then before Andrew Luck was Peyton Manning. And that was it, right? Those 3 dudes. And he just doesn't get pass catching, and he's not going to score touchdowns. So no thanks.
Okay. All right. I'm a little higher on Etienne. We'll get there, though. Mm-hmm. For me, though, moving into tier 3, this is the first all workhorse tier. I think these guys get basically the bulk of their team's runs and targets. Not going to be any type of committee, right? Like one that we're going to see in New York, but the offenses just aren't going to be scoring a lot of touchdowns. So I think the ceilings for these guys might be a little bit capped. You'll probably agree with a couple of them. Cam Akers coming in at the 16, Miles Sanders at the 15, Damien Pierce. I know you like that one. I don't know how high. I don't remember how high I saw him on yours. And then I have Najae Harris. I don't know who you're going to make a case for here. I think I'll speak to Cam Akers because he's probably the one we're a little bit different on. In 2022, and Cam Akers is going as an RB24 on ESPN, so I have him up about 8 spots. He averaged 9.4 points for the whole of 2022. Once he came back, though, after him and Sean McVay basically hugged it out, and Les Snead all hugged it out, they got together. They just, they made peace. The agent was there. They hugged it out. He wasn't traded in the trade deadline pass. Cam Akers averaged 16 points per game in PPR leagues. And if you look at what the top 12 running backs averaged last year is about in that 16 to 17 range. So that's kind of why I have him here. And the team was not good last year. I don't think they're going to be good in 2023. The defense is going to be really bad, so they'll need to score points. I don't think that's going to take him like a massive touchdown total to finish here. I think it's just going to be, the 15 carries, 20 carries, maybe 5 to 6 targets in the pass game. But I feel pretty good about him. So that's the guy I'm picking to talk about, not just because he's a Ram and I'm a Rams fan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Cam Akers is not in my top 24, so
I know.
I'm not in on it. There's a couple guys this year that I'm I'm so out on that I'm like, this might bite me in the ass, but I have to stick to what I believe, right? Like, fantasy football is about sticking it to your buddies because you feel like you know more, and when you know more and you really stick it to them, then and I'm not a guy who gets shares of guys in leagues and stuff like that, right? If I'm drafting around the same position, it's the same team. I got dudes, and I'm willing to go 6-8 picks ahead to get my guy because I like him better than all the ones that are going to go in between those picks and stuff like that. So Cam Akers isn't one of those for me. The Achilles is a concern for me. Just see people come off Achilles and do well. The team as well too, but he did play pretty well against what he had last year. I think he got stuck in there because Sean McVay was trying to tank, and he's like, "Screw it, I'll play this asshole because he wants playing time."
Well, I mean,
you're not going to do anything though, right, or whatever like that. So,
I mean, halfway through the season, they're going to be what, 3-5 or worse. It's going to be the same exact setup, right? If Stafford might be injured, the offensive line is going to be fucked. That's exactly where they were last year when he took over from week 13 on and averaged basically that RB1 stat line. So I feel good, and it's a value, like what we were talking about earlier, RB24.
It's going to be crazy because if the Rams have like a middle of the pack defense this year, we expect them to be like bottom sixth of the league, right? So, but if they have a halfway decent offense, middle of the pack 15, 16 or something like that, the Rams are going to win a lot more games than I think that is being projected. So my tier 3, I also have 4 guys here. I'm kind of the same workhorse type backs, or something like that. I got Damian Pierce at 16, Aaron Jones at 15, Rhamondre Stevenson at 14, and then that's after the Zeke stuff. And then I have Joe Mixon at 13. The one I'll talk about is Joe Mixon. So 3 games last year of less than 10 fantasy points, and one of those was the DeMar Hamlin game. So let's count it as 2, right? He missed weeks 12 and 13, yet still finished as the RB12 in PPR. There's really not guys behind him that are competing for a bunch of carries and touches and stuff like that. They drafted a dude. They got some okay guys, but it's more spell type work, than a real committee there. Year 3 of this entire squad being together, if you discount Joe Burrow's first season and dare I say the team that we all expect to take another step forward, right? This is the year for them to really put it all together, go compete for a Super Bowl. They're in a tough division. They're in a tough conference. And then when you get out of that conference and you go play in the other conference, you're going to be playing one of those big dogs that got defenses and guys just coming at you left and right from every angle, right? So, and teams that are going to, the NFC is more, it's crazy. The NFC is like a running conference, right? Like,
it's very different.
Like they pound the ball and stuff like that. So it's a different style that's getting put on your, defensive line at the end of the year and all that kind of stuff. So, but it's also hard to find a running back who's going to consistently give you double-digit fantasy points with a bunch of touchdown upside. So there's nothing really I can discount with Joe Mixon. He's going to be solid. You know what you're going to get out of him, and I think you're getting him somewhere around end of the second into the third, somewhere around there in your draft.
It's RB12 on ESPN.
So RB12, so the turn of 2 or 3 or something like that, potentially. It's crazy because I do some mock drafting or some other drafts and stuff like that, and I get into it, and it's like, well, the running back receiver stuff is kind of even as you get through that first couple rounds. So the talks of 0 RB stuff and all this kind of stuff is kind of like whack. I think everybody's getting like one anchor type of guy and then going other directions. But Joe Mixon, a guy you're not going to be, unless he's hurt, you're not going to be upset with the production you can get out of him, right? You can stick him in there as your RB1 if you're going wide receiver heavy. You get a tight end in the first. You want to get that quarterback in the second, third, fourth round or whatever like that. Joe Mixon's a good viable option for you there. My 13.
So I'm going into tier 2, and Joe Mixon is not in it, which tells you I am like you were last year on Joe Mixon this year.
Yes, I like it. Yes.
Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about him in that tier. But my tiers are crazy as far as like comparing it to their actual ESPN ADPs. But for tier 2, this tier is either elite pass catchers or guys who've done a fuck ton of work on the ground, Derrick Henry types, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's going to be a couple contract holdouts, suppressing 2 of them. So obviously 2 of my busts are going to be in here. But starting at the 12, Aaron Jones. I have Travis Etienne after that, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor's a big tier. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Taylor's there. Derrick Henry, massive workload on the ground, right? Saquon Barkley and Austin Ekeler. The 2, 3, 5 are in my tier 2. They should be in tier 1 based off how I have my guys ranked, but they're not. I guess the guy I'll spend a little bit of time on is Aaron Jones because I do have him bumped up a spot You already spent some time on Etienne. We've talked about Taylor and Jacobs, but Aaron Jones is electric. Preseason week 1, they had him out there on the first possession. He was the first play.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what they ran, but Aaron Jones basically ran a route. I think it was like he was in the backfield. He just ran off to the right. Little short pass from Jordan Love. But I think you're going to see that throughout the season because this is Jordan Love's basically first full year under center. He's played sparingly a little bit to kind of spell Rodgers, whether he was like on the sideline missing some time with an injury or it was like a week 18 situation where they were done. Right.
Yeah.
But he's electric. LaFleur is going to rely on his backs to kind of take the work off Love's plate. And he's just a little bit older for running backs. Otherwise, I might have him higher because he has finished top 5 in the past. And I think he's going to get a similar type workload if his body can handle it, right? A.J. Dillon's also there, so they'll kind of share some of that work. But as far as receiving work, I think it's going to be mostly Aaron Jones this year.
Yeah, I like that. My tier 2 goes from 12 to 4. So at 12, I got the infamous Austin Ekeler. My 11 is Jonathan Taylor, both two guys who are just no-goes for me because I'm never going to draft them where they're going. My number 10 is Miles Sanders. And then I got Derrick Henry, Javonte Williams, who's the guy I'm going to talk about. Josh Jacobs at 7. Obviously, proceed with caution and wait for some news. Don't draft him there if he's not on the team, especially if you're going to Labor Day weekend drafting and stuff like that. Get out of here. My number 6, Tony Pollard. This is another guy that I have ranked at 6 and I'm completely out on. This is the guy who I was referencing when I was like, there's another thing where I'm just like, this is going to bite me in the ass, I feel like. But I'm completely out on Tony Pollard. Najae Harris at 5, who I'm really high on. Saquon at 4. Those two guys, for me, I could have them as tier 1 dudes. Those are guys that I'm comfortable being in the first round, taking them. They're not going to cost you first round capital. I was talking about how you're drafting in the 5. I've done a lot of stuff where it's like, I'll get Kelsey at the 5. I'll get Najae on coming back, and then, I can figure out a wide or, Najae at the come around, or Waddle and then Najae, depending on what people are doing and stuff like that. So really like that there too, and Saquon. But Saquon, I feel like it's going to be a guy where I'm not going to draft him, and he's going to be RB1 or whatever like that. But I'll talk about Javonte. I have him at 8, so he's at ADP of 79 in NFFC, and that's National Fantasy Football Championship. So a lot of high stakes stuff. And he just got a huge upgrade in coaching, offensive line, and scheme. We talked about Joe Lombardi with the Austin Ekeler stuff earlier. And he's responsible for those guys: Drake Bell, Theo Riddick, Pierre Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and everybody's love child, Austin Ekeler. He's coming off a nasty knee injury, so I get that. But everything they're saying is that he'll be ready to go by week 1. He's practicing, all that kind of stuff, doing his thing. So there's something about it to where I'm just not going to go against a Joe Lombardi running back, where the team's defense should be able to limit the amount of points that the other teams are giving, right? Which gives you more rushing opportunity in the fourth quarter. So after teams are tired, they've been on the field for a long time because your defense is off the field, right? Getting them off the field for 3 and outs, short drives, which they're pretty good at. They got a good defense. And then a Sean Payton team that should be able to put up more than 18 points. So I expect them to lead games in the fourth quarter, get a lot of rushing stuff, and have that short passing game to the running back be an extension of the run when they get into those passing situations in fourth quarters and stuff like that. Now, after week 1 preseason, it's a little concerning because you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And the worst thing and I think we've talked about it before, like way early episodes. Maybe it was with when we were going through every person in the league that we have and stuff like that as this podcast started out as. But the worst thing that Russell Wilson does as a quarterback is the best thing he's done as a quarterback, and that's when he gets in trouble, the way he gets out. He doesn't climb the pocket like normal quarterbacks that do really well do. He's succeeded with turning his back to the offensive line and running out and scrambling, right? But you see him try to do that in their first preseason game. He's too slow. He's too slow now, but it's a natural instinct. So I don't know how this is going to go because I'm really high on the Broncos this year, and it feels like this might be my Chargers moment from last year. But I'm really high on them, and I expect them to do really well, and I project them to do really well, and their players to do really well. But if Russell Wilson's going to continue to try to escape the pocket by doing that rolling out stuff, defensive ends already know. Like, they're going in, and they're with outside leverage, pushing in, collapsing the pocket, but being able to keep their outside out there so they can contain, and then it's like boom, sack, because They know they can push a guy in a little bit. They know what Russell Wilson's going to do, and then boom. So that is a concern for me on whether or not they can really score points in this offense. We'll see in the next couple preseason games and stuff like that. But I expect Javonte Williams to have a big year. I think he's going to catch like 80 balls this year, 80 to 90 balls. That's what these running backs do in these offenses. And
Kamara had that stretch. Was it like 3 years in a row? He had 81 catches.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Same offense. Yeah.
We saw the same thing happen with Austin Ekeler. His catches went up, tenfold from that time, and he's RB1, and everybody loves the guy. So everybody loved Pierre Thomas too, right? We were big Pierre Thomas guys in PPR back in the old days of Yahoo Fantasy.
I remember that.
Javonte Williams, my number 8. That's the one I like. I think he's the biggest value on the entire draft board.
There's a lot of risk associated with him. You mentioned the knee injury. You mentioned Russ, basically some bad habits or maybe some potential decline there, right? He is getting older. It's a new offense, but he's going off the board right now for ESPN as the RB29.
Yeah.
You just take him a couple picks earlier. Like that's all that risk. It's fine because you're getting him so late, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about opportunity cost.
And you get a cheap handcuff in Samaje Perine as well too. So
and that dude's always been solid.
Yeah.
So if he does have to step into that role, he's going to be able to produce. He did it with Cincinnati.
And that's one thing I like to look at when you're looking at guys you're going to put in these top things that are going to be able to produce. Because most of these guys will probably produce around the same, right? But I'm going to rank a guy higher if I feel like the entire backfield's good, so that I can handcuff it. But nobody's going to give a shit about the handcuff, right? Yeah. Same thing when we get up into tier 1 and we're both talking about Nick Chubb. You got Jerome Ford. He's the cheapest dude on the board, right? So,
and you draft those guys. You draft your Javonte Williams or Nick Chubbs, and then you just circle the handcuff, right? You circle Jerome Ford, you circle Samaje Perine. You just take them around earlier, right? They're not going to be on anyone's radar. Yeah. They shouldn't be.
Yeah, they will.
So, cool. Moving on to tier 1. So I am very high on all 5 of these guys. I feel like any one of them is capable of putting up an overall RB1 finish. 2023, though, I feel isn't as clear for us as it has been in past years. If anyone stays healthy, right? Like 2 years ago, if CMC plays most of the season, he crushes everyone by like 100 fantasy points. This year, it just feels like we have a lot more parity, at least in this top tier. I know you and I have a couple guys who might differ a little bit. But at the 5 spot for me, I have Joe Mixon. I know you had him in, I think, tier 2 or maybe the front end of tier 3.
Yeah.
At the 4, I have Nick Chubb. Then I have Tony Pollard. Then I have Brian Robinson. And then I have, obviously, CMC.
Bijan.
So Bijan Robinson, sorry. So for overall, like ESPN rankings, that's the 1, CMC, the 4, Bijan, the 8, Pollard, the 9, Chubb, and the 12, Mixon. My rankings are all over the place. But I think I'm going to talk about Mixon because, I think we're different on him. I think you were 2 tiers different. Still no word of the suspension, though I did see in the last day or 2, he was found not guilty of whatever the allegations were. I forget. It was like an aggravated assault or something along those lines, right?
It was so
the suspension, if it happens, it's not going to be anything bad, right? It might be a game or 2 for personal conduct. Samaje Perine, you talked about him. He's now in Denver. He chewed up 50 targets last season. Those are vacated. And there's no other meaningful running backs on the roster. You're going to tell me Chris Evans is going to step into that Samaje Perine role? Probably not. Who's the other one? Chase Brown, they just drafted, a rookie, a little smaller? Probably not. I think this is the year that, and Mixon renegotiated his contract, right? So they're getting him for a little bit cheaper. I think this is the year where if he stays healthy, you're high on this offense, I'm high on this offense. This is a year where he's going to get a lot of touchdowns, a lot of targets now that Samaje's gone. And if he stays healthy, I don't see him not finishing inside the top 5. And that's why I have him here at the 5 spot.
Nice. I remember last year we were talking and I was like, yeah, I'd take Joe Mixon 3.
You were so high.
I'll take
It worked out. He was good last year. Last year he finished as the 10, but he was being drafted. I think way past that. I think it's like an RB2 or something like that.
Well, I always feel like a lot of times in these top tiers, all I want is guys to just be there because they're going to produce, right? You want the guy who's going to be there, be consistent, be able to play for you. Just don't fuck it up. Don't go out there and do Austin Ekeler at pick 4 or something like that, right? Or 5 or 6 or something like that. When Austin Ekeler is a back end of the 3rd round guy, right? Based off of what he's going to produce, that sets you back so much. When you draft a 1st round guy and he's a 1st round guy, you're pretty good.
Yeah, Mixon's RB12, so you can get him in the 2nd, 3rd round, depending, right? So you can grab a receiver and then come back and grab him as a running back.
That's nice. My tier 1, I have 3 running backs, so it goes from the 3 to 1, CMC, Nick Chubb, and Bijan Robinson. The CMC one feels like the guy's never really had an offensive line. He went to the Niners, right? And that's cool. There's going to be a lot more Deebo Samuel in this offense this year. they're going to need it because they have basically 3/5 of their offensive line is complete dog shit or unknown. We're talking like the 30-something, 50-something ranked run blocking offensive linemen in the league, right? Which is, you're up there, right? Or whatever like that. But it's not what you got out of Trent Williams. Mike McGlinchey was amazing in run protection, run blocking, but terrible in pass pro. And that's why he got sent his way, because they can't afford to keep having guys not be able to pass block. But now they got a rookie on that end, or a guy who hasn't played football. Basically, I think he was on the team last year, but he hasn't played meaningful snaps or anything like that to get a PFF rating or anything like that. The two guards are completely dog shit. Like they're not great, right? The scheme is good, but the horses they have up front are not there like they have had in the past. So I think you're going to see a lot more Deebo Samuel, a lot of outside stuff that they did like 2 years ago, right? Where Deebo was getting a lot of rushing and stuff like that to create confusion off of the defenses. That's going to take away from Christian McCaffrey, but he's Christian McCaffrey. And it is what it is, right? But they're obviously going to want to keep him healthy as well too. So do you lose fourth quarter touches to guys like Eli Mitchell or, these other guys on the field as well? Because they should be up in a lot of games with the way the defense could play.
So McCaffrey averaged 21 points per game last year, and that was with Carolina and San Francisco. Still averaged 21 points per game, finishes the number 2 RB overall. Second only to Austin Ekeler, who was at about 22 points per game. But you've already talked about it like ad nauseum on my show, and then here in 2 or 3 episodes. He's not getting all that passing work, and CMC, I believe, is still going to get a pretty big chunk. Right, I know Deebo will impact that a little bit, but that counts for so much in PPR leagues. So I don't think if everyone stays healthy, is going to supplant him as the RB1.
Yeah, but I got Nick Chubb at the 2, and then Bijan Robinson at 1.
Bold.
They run the ball.
Did you see his run this game they just played, week 2 preseason?
Yeah,
pretty good.
Yeah. He's kind of good at football. He's basically like Saquon Barkley times 4. Like when he first came into the league, that dude is amazing. But I'm gonna talk Nick Chubb. So, because Nick Chubb I have at 2, and I think he falls into that turn of the 1-2 or something like that. So he's back, into the 6 or 7 or something like that. But so the team is going to continue to be a top 5 rushing attempts team, and with Jerome Ford spelling Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford. That's not
who?
Yeah, his name's Jerome. He's not getting the ball right. Hall of Fame game also opened up with a bunch of screen passes. So we're going to see a lot more targets to the running back position in this game. They had 8 targets to the position by the end of the night that night. And it was like the first 2 plays they ran was screens to the running backs, right? We only saw 2 in week 1 of preseason, but that's also a game where you have 3 quarterbacks fighting for potentially 2 spots, because it's almost like DTR cemented himself now as the quarterback too.
So good. What school did he go to?
I don't know, some dumb school. They really messed up my eyes when I went there one time for medical stuff. But you got Deshaun Watson as a quarterback 1. DTR's coming out as the quarterback 2. But in these preseason games, they're cutting down the roster. These guys need to show that they can throw the ball downfield, stretch the field, they can take shots, and that they can put up yards and numbers and touchdowns. Right? You're not going to do that kind of in the scheme of the offense stuff in preseason weeks like that, right? Those guys are going to be like, hey, here's some stuff that we would do here, but I'm going to take the chance and get it down the field because I need to get paid, right? I don't need to be on a practice squad or something like that. So being on the active roster gets you paid more. So that's what I see out of week 1 difference from Hall of Fame game. Where Hall of Fame games like, hey, we're going to go through the stuff that we do. This is where we're throwing the ball. It needs to be structured or whatever like that. See what we got here. The loss of Kareem Hunt in this offense is a big thing, and Chubb is arguably the best overall running back in all of football.
Pure runner.
Pure runner. He can catch the ball really well. He can get up the field. He can change directions really well. I'd put like him, CMC, Barkley, and I think the thing that separates them for me is the fact that Nick Chubb is always healthy. So you add a couple more catches, 20-plus yards, maybe a few more touchdowns on the season, and you got him over 300 fantasy points on the year in PPR, and I expect this Deshaun Watson-led offense to hum this year, and there's going to be a lot more opportunities for him to get into that red zone, green zone touches and stuff like that. So
it's his backfield too. You mentioned Kareem Hunt. They also let Dearness Johnson walk. I think he signed with like Jacksonville or something. Yeah. So it's literally just Nick Chubb. Yeah. Ford is there basically just to spell him after 3 or 4 straight possessions. So
nice.
Yeah, I like it.
Nice.
I like it a lot.
Let us know in the comments below who you think we're bozos for, who you're going to let your bozo teammates draft. And just trust me on this one. Trust Tony on this one. He had him a little bit lower too. Let your bozo league mates draft Austin Ekeler in fantasy football this year.